All right, let's dive right into this explainer and look at the absolute anatomy of what has to be one of the most stunning comebacks we've seen in recent playoff history. We're looking at Game 1 of the 2026 Eastern Conference Finals, Knicks, Cavaliers, Madison Square Garden. This wasn't just a win. It was a literal masterclass in resilience and shifting momentum. And, as we're going to see, it was all about executing flawless late-game defensive adjustments. If you really want to understand how a playoff game can completely flip on its head, well, this is your perfect case study.
So think about this for a second. How do you erase a 22-point deficit with only 8 minutes left on the clock? Against a high-caliber team like Cleveland, that feels honestly flat-out impossible. I mean, we're talking about the Eastern Conference Finals here. These are the best of the best. The Cavaliers had been executing just brilliant basketball for 3 solid quarters. They were hitting shots, managing the clock, and they had completely silenced that Madison Square Garden crowd. To pull off a comeback like this, you can't just get hot shooting the basketball. No, you have to completely dismantle the opponent's offensive rhythm through precise, suffocating defensive adjustments, all while executing perfectly on the other end. It literally requires a total system shock.
And that massive 22-point gap? It felt entirely insurmountable, especially considering the Knicks looked extremely rusty after a long 9-day layoff. Remember, they hadn't played a single game since May 10th when they swept the Sixers in the previous round. And boy, did that rust show early on. If you look at their defensive rotations, they were incredibly sluggish. Their closeouts on Cleveland's perimeter shooters were a half-step slow, which just handed the Cavs high-efficiency looks all night long. Plus, offensively, they couldn't buy a basket. For the first 40 minutes, it really looked like the rest had hurt them way more than it helped, and Cleveland was poised to walk away with an easy Game 1 road victory.
But then came this explosive scoring run to close out the game. A historic 44-11 run. Just let that sink in for a minute. In the final 13 minutes of the game, the Knicks outscored a phenomenal Cavaliers team by 33 points. That's wild. This avalanche wasn't just about New York suddenly making shots, though. It was really about completely neutralizing Cleveland's high-efficiency scoring looks. They turned this unstoppable offensive machine into a team that couldn't even get a clean pass off. It was just a massive defensive evolution that directly fed into an aggressive, unstoppable offensive attack.
It really was a tale of two halves, or more accurately, a tale of the first 40 minutes versus the finale. Just look at that early three-point shooting, a dismal 4 for 23. Wow. Because those outside shots weren't falling, Cleveland's defense was able to just sag off and pack the paint. But as the fourth quarter progressed, the Knicks pivoted hard. They transitioned into this relentless physical offensive attack. Jalen Brunson started hunting favorable matchups, driving hard into the paint to either score or draw fouls. And here's the crucial part. This offensive aggression was fueled directly by a sudden, terrifyingly intense defensive effort on the other end of the floor.
Let's break down those final 8 minutes, because it reveals exactly how they chipped away at this thing. At 7:52 in the fourth, it looks incredibly bleak. They're down 93-71. But literally seconds later, Brunson scores, and that ignites a massive 18-1 run. For me, though, the real turning point is right at the 4:20 mark. The Knicks' defense suddenly just locked in. They perfectly neutralized Cleveland's high pick-and-roll and ball screen actions. They were switching flawlessly on the perimeter, completely blowing up Cleveland's spacing, and they forced this devastating shot clock violation that just totally demoralized the Cavs. From there, it was a slow bleed for Cleveland, right up until Brunson hit an absolutely unbelievable clutch floater with 19 seconds left to tie it up at 101.
Now, the turning point becomes crystal clear when you look at the clutch performances of the star guards here. Brunson finished with a whopping 38 points, basically willing his team back into the game despite his own struggles from beyond the arc. I mean, he realized his three just wasn't falling. He went 1 for 6, so he relentlessly went to work inside. On the flip side of that, the Knicks made these critical personnel adjustments to aggressively pressure James Harden. By crowding his airspace and applying intense individual defensive pressure, they forced him into a 1 for 8 shooting slump from deep and, crucially, 6 turnovers. That strategic decision to absolutely smother Harden, that was the engine of this comeback.
And, while Brunson was cooking on offense, Karl Anthony Towns perfectly summed up the real catalyst of this historic rally. He pointed out that it was their defense that carried them. The Knicks didn't shoot their way out of this deficit, they defended their way out of it. And Towns himself was super pivotal here. Actually, after struggling with some early foul trouble and a couple of messy turnovers, he totally anchored the paint down the stretch. He even came up with this massive game-saving block on a Donovan Mitchell floater with just over a minute left in regulation, keeping the game within a single possession. Huge play. Looking at the play-by-play data, the Knicks really backed up Towns' words. They completely abandoned those early sluggish rotations we saw, replacing them with an aggressive intensity that just disrupted everything Cleveland wanted to do. We already talked about that fourth quarter shot clock violation, but honestly, their rebounding was just as crucial. You can't mount a comeback if you're giving up second chance points, right? Well, Towns and Josh Hart locked down the defensive glass, ensuring Cleveland only got one look per possession. Furthermore, they made some brilliant personnel adjustments. OG Anunoby, who had struggled mightily against Cleveland shooters early on, really found his legs late. He became an absolute terror, seamlessly switching on to Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, which entirely disrupted their perimeter shooting rhythm. So by the time overtime actually started, those defensive switches had completely shattered Cleveland's rhythm, resulting in 3 final nails in the coffin. First, they opened with a blistering 9-0 run, fueled by just the sheer, chaotic energy of the Garden crowd. But step 2 is the real clincher. At the 4:21 mark in overtime, they forced another Cleveland shot clock violation. I mean, that is the ultimate sign of a suffocated offense. And as Cleveland desperately tried to claw back, the Knicks' individual defensive pressure took over. Jalen Brunson stole a bad pass from Harden at the 42nd mark, and then Mikal Bridges picked Max Stress's pocket shortly after. Get this. They held a potent Cavaliers offense to a jaw-dropping 3 total points in the entire overtime period. Just wild.
Looking ahead to Game 2 at Madison Square Garden, both teams will have entirely clean slates with no injuries reported. This is absolutely fantastic news for basketball fans. For the Knicks, it means OG Anunoby, having survived his first game back from that hamstring strain and shaking off the rust, is totally good to go. And for the Cavaliers, it means no excuses. They have their full arsenal ready to get back on the court: Mitchell, Mobley, Harden, Allen, the whole crew. It really sets the stage for an absolute heavyweight bout with both teams at 100% capacity.
So, what does this all mean? With both squads fully healthy, the major takeaway is whether Cleveland can mentally bounce back after giving up a 22-point lead. To dominate for 3 quarters and have it snatched away by an epic 44-11 run, well, that's the kind of loss that can literally break a team's spirit in the postseason. Can the Cavaliers adjust to the Knicks' aggressive perimeter switching? Are they going to find a way to get James Harden clean looks